So, have you heard about this Euro-Mediterranean network of conference interpreters? ENCI, they call themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen their name pop up a few times. They're all about conference interpreting, right? Mostly in Europe and around the Mediterranean, from what I gather.
Exactly. They really caught my eye because they emphasize this commitment to real professional excellence, all top-notch interpreters. So, in this deep dive, we're going to unpack what ENCI actually does, the kinds of services they offer, and this recent ISO 23155 certification they've been highlighting. Should be pretty interesting, I think, especially with all the stuff you sent over their LinkedIn, that presentation, and their website, too.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Well, first off, I was curious about their structure. Are they a big agency, a company? What's the deal?
From what I've seen, ENCI is not this huge corporate kind of setup.
Yeah.
Their online presence, everything really, points to a more independent organization vibe. They were actually founded pretty recently, back in 2022.
Okay, so fairly new on the scene.
Yeah, it seems like their main thing is this network model. They bring together all these experienced freelance interpreters from a seriously wide geographical area. It's not just Europe, but extends to the entire Mediterranean region. And yeah, you're right, that whole professional excellence thing, it's everywhere in their materials, front and center.
Definitely noticed that. So who are these interpreters then? What's their background?
If you look at the About Us section on their website, it's clear they're not messing around. These are all seriously qualified individuals. Most of them, actually, hold a master's degree in conference interpreting. Not just language studies, but specifically interpreting. That's a pretty high bar.
So we're talking about people who've really dedicated themselves to this profession.
Absolutely. And it's not limited to one language or region either. Fluency in major European languages is a given, but they've also got interpreters who cover languages from the Middle East and Asia.
Wow, so a truly global reach.
What I found really interesting, though, is the emphasis they place on all these professional affiliations and accreditations. Many of these interpreters are members of some seriously prestigious organizations.
Hmm.
For example, the International Association of Conference Interpreters. That's like the gold standard.
I've heard of them. Really strict membership criteria, right?
Yeah, very exclusive. And on top of that, many ENCI interpreters have accreditations from major international bodies, like the UN or the EU. It basically means they've been vetted and approved to work at the highest levels.
Okay, so it's not just a network of individuals, it's a network of recognized experts.
Right, it's a collective of highly credentialed professionals, basically. And that level of expertise translates directly into the kind of work they do. We're talking high stakes, high profile stuff.
So, what kind of events are we talking about here? What sectors do they work in?
They list quite a few in their materials. For starters, there are all these big international events involving governments and public administrations, but also private companies. And their reach is global. We're talking Europe, Africa, Asia.
Pretty wide net they've cast.
Yeah, and it's not just corporate clients either. They work with a lot of global institutions. The big players like the UN, UNICEF, FAO, the World Bank. Places where clear, precise communication is absolutely crucial.
I can only imagine the pressure in those situations. Getting it right must be paramount.
Right? The stakes are really high.
Mm.
And if you think about it, the work these interpreters do, it enables all this vital international dialogue and collaboration to happen.
It's easy to take that for granted, I guess. We just assume someone will be there to translate.
Exactly. But it's way more than just knowing a couple of languages. It's about in-depth cultural understanding, mastering all these complex interpreting techniques, and having really rigorous preparation. Ethics is also a huge part of it.
Ethics, that's an interesting angle.
Yeah, think about the sensitive information they're often dealing with. Confidentiality is absolutely crucial. And it's interesting, they actually refer to themselves as consultant interpreters, which I think says a lot.
Consultant interpreters, that's different.
It is, right. It suggests they don't just see themselves as people who translate words. They're positioning themselves as advisors, guiding clients on all aspects of interpretation and communication strategy.
So it's more strategic, less about just showing up and doing the job.
Exactly. It's a partnership, almost.
Hmm.
And it raises a good question for anyone who's ever organized an international event. Do you see your interpreters as a logistical need or as partners who can make your communication more effective?
It's an interesting shift in perspective. But let's get into the nuts and bolts, the actual services ENCI offers. It can't all be about whispering in someone's ear at a summit, right?
Right, there's a whole range of services, actually. They list them all out quite clearly on their website and in that presentation. So first up, we've got the classic Simultaneous interpreting. That's the one most people probably picture someone in a soundproof booth, translating in real time while the speaker is talking. You see it at big conferences, summits, things like that. People listen through headsets.
Right. The interpreter is basically keeping pace word for word. Must be intense.
Yeah, it takes serious skill and focus. Then there's consecutive interpreting, which is a different beast altogether. It requires incredible memory and note-taking abilities. The speaker delivers a chunk of their speech, pauses, and then the interpreter, who's been meticulously taking notes, steps in and reproduces that speech in the target language.
It always amazes me how they can remember so much detail.
It's pretty impressive.
Huh.
This type is often used in smaller, more intimate settings. Think interviews, negotiations, press conferences, those kinds of things.
Got it. So, simultaneous for the big events, consecutive for the smaller, more focused gatherings. What else is there?
Then you've got liaison interpreting, which is more about facilitated communication. Making sure everyone understands each other in smaller, less formal settings. It could be during audits, training workshops, or even work dinners. Basically, where you need someone to bridge the language gap between a small group of people.
So it's a bit more conversational and interactive.
Exactly. Similar to that is accompanying interpreting, which happens when, say, you're at a fair, an exhibition, or even on a guided tour. The interpreter goes along with the group and translates on the spot as needed.
Makes sense. So it's all about the context, the size of the group, the level of formality.
Yeah, the right type of interpreting depends on the situation. They also specifically mention legal interpreting, which is for all the high-stakes legal stuff like trials, arbitrations, those kinds of things. Accuracy and precision are absolutely critical there, you can imagine.
Oh, absolutely. One wrong word could change everything.
Exactly. And then, of course, reflecting the times we live in, there's remote interpreting. That's for video conferences, webinars, all that. They often use platforms like Zoom or sometimes dedicated remote simultaneous interpreting setups.
Right, because everything is online these days, so they've adapted to that new reality.
Absolutely. And what I find impressive is that they don't just provide the interpreters, they handle all the logistics too.
Yeah.
Like if your event needs booths and consoles and receivers, they'll take care of the rental and setup.
So a one-stop shop for all your interpreting needs.
Basically, yeah. And for smaller events, or if you need something more mobile, they offer a portable simultaneous translation system. Sometimes you don't need the whole booth setup.
Right, that sounds much more practical for certain situations. So geographically, where do they primarily operate? I know they mentioned Europe and the Mediterranean, but do they work globally?
Their core area is definitely Spain
Mm.
and the wider EMEA region, so Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. That's a significant economic and political zone, so it makes sense they'd focus there.
Yeah, lots of international collaboration happening in those areas.
Right, but their work takes them to multilingual conferences and meetings all over, both in person and remotely. Now let's talk about the subjects they deal with. It's way more than just basic business language.
I was wondering about that. How specialized are they?
Very. Their materials list some really specific subject areas, which makes sense if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
To interpret accurately, you need to understand the nuances of the topic. So they cover the expected fields like business, economics, and finance, politics.
Yeah, the usual suspects.
Right, but it goes much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
They've got people specializing in cooperation and development, agriculture and food, environment, all these crucial global issues.
So they're staying on top of current affairs.
Definitely. And then it gets even more specialized with science, including the medical and pharmaceutical fields, super technical stuff. Law, of course, is there too. And technology, which covers general industry, but also cybersecurity. That's a big one these days.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So much happening in the cyber world.
Right. But it doesn't stop there.
Mm-hmm.
They even have interpreters for media, like live radio and TV broadcasts, plus education and training, and even art and culture. So they're covering pretty much everything.
Wow, that's a truly diverse range of expertise. I guess it makes sense, though. The more specialized the topic, the more specialized the interpreter needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't want someone whose expertise is in, say, translating novels to be interpreting at a highly technical patent dispute. Each field has its own jargon, its own specific terminology.
Right, that's a really good point. You need someone who understands the subject matter inside and out. And to do all that, across so many fields, they must cover a vast number of languages.
They do, they really do. Major languages from all over Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. They list them all out in their materials.
Let's hear it. What's the full linguistic lineup?
Okay, so for Europe, it's pretty expensive. We're talking German, Spanish, French, Italian, of course, but also Czech, Greek, Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, pretty much everything you can think of.
Wow, that's impressive. So pretty much anyone from Europe is covered. What about the Middle East?
They list Arabic, Hebrew, Kurdish, Persian, and Turkish.
Okay, all the major languages in that region. And what about Asia?
For Asia, they have Chinese, Korean, Filipino, Hindi, Indonesian, Japanese, Thai, and Vietnamese. It's a really comprehensive list.
So with that kind of language coverage and all those specialist areas, their client base must be pretty diverse as well.
It is. They mention governments, international organizations, NGOs, all kinds of associations, and of course, businesses from various sectors. Specifically, they list pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, technology, engineering, publishing, media, justice, even the automotive industry. Pretty much everything under the sun.
So they really are covering all bases. And speaking of covering bases, let's talk about this ISO 23155 certification they've been making a big deal about. They announced it on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago and seem really proud of it.
Yeah, it's clearly a big achievement for them.
But what is it exactly? Break it down for us.
So in their own words, ISO 23155 is the international standard specifically for conference interpreting services. It's basically a set of best practices and requirements that cover pretty much every aspect of providing these services. Everything from, the qualifications of the interpreters themselves to how assignments are managed, quality assurance, and even confidentiality and data security.
Okay, so it's like a quality stamp, a guarantee that they're operating at the highest level.
Exactly. It's a big deal for ENCI to have achieved this certification, and it sends a strong message to potential clients.
Speaking of which, what does it actually mean for clients? What's the tangible benefit of working with an ISO 23155 certified provider?
It means several things. First off, it's a guarantee of quality. You know you're getting a service that meets the highest international standards, which should, in theory, lead to smoother communication at your event.
Okay, so peace of mind knowing you're in good hands.
Right. It also gives you increased confidence in the provider. Knowing they've met these rigorous standards just gives you that extra reassurance that they're professional and competent, and ultimately, it signifies a reliable partnership. They're committed to continuous improvement and delivering exceptional service.
So it's a sign that they take their work seriously and are constantly striving to be better. What about for the industry as a whole? Is ENCI's certification significant in a broader sense?
Absolutely. It raises the bar for the entire industry. Other providers will see this and maybe be encouraged to reach that same level of quality and professionalism. And it promotes standardization, which is important for any industry, but especially one where accuracy and reliability are so crucial. Plus, it helps elevate the professional recognition of conference interpreters.
Makes sense. So it's a win for ENCI, a win for clients, and a win for the industry as a whole. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I noticed that ENCI uses their LinkedIn to share some really helpful advice for anyone who's in the position of needing to hire interpreters. They make a good point that it shouldn't just be about the fee.
Yeah, they're big on that. They've got a whole list of factors to consider.
Like what? Give us a rundown.
Well, the first thing they emphasize is defining your needs.
Mm.
You need to be really clear about what you need from your interpreters, like what language combinations are essential for your event.
Yeah, that's pretty basic, right?
Absolutely. But then you need to think about the mode of interpreting that's most appropriate. Is it simultaneous, consecutive, whispered, or maybe some kind of hybrid or remote setup?
Right, because each situation calls for a different approach.
Exactly. And just as important as the languages is the subject matter expertise. You want interpreters who understand the content being discussed, not just the words.
Like we were saying earlier, you wouldn't want a literary translator handling a technical engineering conference.
Exactly. Then they talk about experience and professionalism. Asking for references from previous clients is always a good idea, and they recommend looking for interpreters who are members of reputable professional associations, like AIIC.
So looking for those credentials, those signs of quality, makes sense.
They also highlight the importance of technical equipment. If your event needs booths and all that, you need to make sure your provider can supply high-quality, ISO-certified equipment and that they've got technicians to handle everything.
Right. The technology is a huge part of it, especially for simultaneous interpreting.
And then, of course, preparation is key. ENCI suggests giving interpreters all the relevant materials well in advance, the program, presentations, background documents, anything that can help them familiarize themselves with the topic.
So no last-minute scrambling.
No, preparation is crucial. And they also recommend clarifying any potentially tricky technical terminology beforehand and doing a thorough sound and interpretation test before the event.
All very sensible advice. Anything else on their checklist?
Budget, of course, is always a factor. They recommend getting detailed quotes that outline all the costs, and being aware of potential extra expenses, like travel and accommodation for the interpreters. And finally, communication. Keep the lines of communication open with your provider and designate a single point person on your team to handle all the coordination.
Makes sense. Keep it clear, keep it organized.
Right. So those are some key takeaways from their LinkedIn advice. And another thing they've been talking about online, which is relevant to all kinds of fields, is the whole AI thing.
Oh yeah, the rise of the machines. It's hard to ignore how quickly AI is developing, especially in areas like language processing.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And ENCI acknowledges that these AI-powered tools, like voice-to-text software and all sorts of automated assistance technologies, are increasingly present in the world of conference interpreting. And they raise some really important considerations for interpreters as this technology keeps evolving.
So what are the main things interpreters need to be thinking about in relation to AI?
Well, the first concern is accuracy and reliability. AI has come a long way, but it can still struggle with complex language, technical jargon, and different accents. So interpreters need to be cautious about relying too heavily on AI-generated output.
Right, it's not a perfect solution, at least not yet.
Yeah, definitely not. Then there's the whole privacy and confidentiality issue. Many AI tools process audio and text data, which raises some ethical and security concerns, especially when sensitive information is being discussed.
Yeah, data security is a huge concern these days.
Absolutely. So interpreters need to be extra careful about the tools they use and make sure they comply with all the relevant data protection standards. And ENCI also highlights the importance of the human factor. You know, interpreting isn't just about converting words from one language to another. It's about conveying tone, emotion, cultural context, all those subtle nuances that make communication meaningful.
I guess AI hasn't quite cracked that yet.
Right. And so human interpreters still play a crucial role. They also talk about the need for adaptation and continuous learning. Interpreters need to stay informed about these new technologies and learn how to use them effectively where appropriate.
So it's about working with AI, not against it.
Exactly. And finally, they suggest that AI could actually lead to greater collaboration. Instead of seeing it as a threat, they encourage thinking about how AI tools can enhance efficiency and quality, with human interpreters remaining at the heart of the process.
It's an interesting perspective, and they actually posed a question to their online community, and now I'm posing it to you. Is AI a threat or an opportunity for conference interpreters? Something to ponder, I think.
Definitely. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on is ENCI's recognition of International Mother Language Day on their LinkedIn. That was a nice touch.
Yeah, I saw that post. It's celebrated every year on February 21st right now.
Exactly. It's a UNESCO initiative to raise awareness about linguistic and cultural diversity and to promote multilingualism. The date itself marks the anniversary of students in Bangladesh who protested in 1952 to defend their right to speak Bengali.
So it's about celebrating linguistic diversity and the right to use your mother tongue.
Absolutely. And ENCI makes a good point that your mother language is more than just a means of communication. It's a connection to your roots, your history, your culture. It's a fundamental human right.
I like that they took the time to highlight that.
And they tied it back to their own profession, emphasizing the role of interpreters as bridges between languages and cultures. They even offered suggestions for how people can participate in International Mother Language Day. You know, learning a few words in another language, reading a book or watching a film, attending cultural events, or simply reflecting on the importance of your own mother tongue.
Simple yet powerful ways to engage with linguistic diversity.
Definitely. So to wrap up our deep dive into ENCI, I think it's safe to say we're looking at a highly qualified network of conference interpreters who are dedicated to quality and professionalism.
Absolutely. And that ISO 23155 certification is a real testament to their commitment. They're clearly at the top of their game, offering services across a huge range of languages and specialist areas.
And they're not shying away from the technological advancements happening in their field, like AI. They're engaging with it thoughtfully, and seeing the potential for collaboration.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. We've talked about language, we've talked about technology, but what other factors do you think will be crucial for effective cross-cultural communication in the future? How will technology and human expertise and this deep understanding of different cultures all come together to shape how we communicate on a global scale?
It's a really interesting question to consider. The landscape is constantly evolving, and it'll be fascinating to see what the future holds.
Absolutely. And on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time.